All right. Well, you're listening to The Pastor with No Answers, and this is going to be an interesting conversation here. And I don't know how to pronounce your last name, Alan. What's your last name?
It took me a while too. It's Morrow. It's like tomorrow.
Oh, gotcha.
It just doesn't look like that.
That's perfect. So how old were you when you figured it out?
Well, I'm married into this name.
That's right. Duh.
I used to be a Vickers, which was real easy. And so Italian, you're supposed to say it like Morrow, but whatever. Don't know.
Gotcha. So let me give people a quick backdrop. Most of you regular listeners, y'all know who Chip Judd is, a familiar voice to this podcast. Ellen Morrow, if you I know we have a lot of overlap with listeners. If you haven't checked out the season 2 of Depolarized, she and Dan Koch co-host that show, and it's a splendid show. The current season, second season, deals a lot with Trump voters. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it the 87? Is that the right number of conservative Christians that voted for Trump? Is it 87%?
81% of all white evangelicals.
White evangelicals. That's right.
Trump.
That's right. White is very important to add to that.
Yeah.
So Chip and I we had a trip on the way to Birmingham, Alabama from Charleston, South Carolina. That is a long drive, 2 ways, with some other white male pastors. And we were talking about the Billy Graham rule. For our listeners, basically what that means is, I think is our vice president, is his name Mike Pence? Mike Pence, I think.
You should know that, but yeah.
Yeah, Mike. Oh, Mike. So he basically came out and said that he practices the Billy Graham rule, which is, I think in simplest terms, he's never alone with a female that's not his wife. And
I think no dining, no travel, no meetings.
Right. Dining, travel, or meetings. So like he can be in an elevator and not pray the rosary or anything like that, right? I guess. Maybe so.
I don't know. I would hope
right.
not.
So I will say this, that I have been in vocational ministry since 2005. 2008 is when I became a pastor, and the vast majority of that time I have seen this as a very black and white issue. I practiced the Billy Graham rule. So it wasn't until doing the Bad Christian podcast and actually talking to a lot of non-Southern white males, and I personally don't say that in a negative way that I think a lot of people say that. There's nothing wrong with being a Southern white male, for crying out loud, but I definitely was fully on board, and I saw it as a way to keep my marriage safe. I saw it as a way to be above reproach, and I started to talk to some different people, getting some different opinions, but I'll never forget this. So, Chip, and you know who this person is, Jennifer. I'll tell you this, Ellen. So, since 2008, I've had a woman on staff who is very pastoral, who could see herself in ministry for years to come. She has, over the last 8 years, seen other guys come and go, such as Toby Morrell, who's on the Bad Christian podcast. He was on staff with me. Another guy that did student ministry. 2 worship leaders. I mean, she saw so many males in and out, and she saw each and every one of them get to have a relationship with me that she does not get to have, such as going out to eat, chilling, talking, just having time to ourselves, and, what I am able to do with other males, I do not do with her. And she, we talked about it, and she's just like, yeah, it sucks. She says, I would love to have some of that time with you. I would love to be able to, quote unquote, grow in ministry and experience some of the stuff that you allow these other guys to experience and all that stuff. And bottom line is, I'm at a church that they're not cool with that, so I don't really get to make a decision in this regard. But I would also say that for the most part, I've agreed with it. But now people like Ellen and other, many guests that we've had on Bad Christian, Pastor with No Answers, have definitely put my antennas up to where I would find myself somewhere in the middle. But because of a lot of what Chip is going to say with his experience in in counseling a lot of couples, a lot of marriages, and all that stuff. I can't get my head out of thinking that for some people it is the right thing. But I am extremely, like I was telling these guys on this trip to Birmingham and back, I was like, you guys have got to at least see the other perspective and the message that it sends, and how in the world do we keep a Billy Graham rule and at the same time not instill like shame and like this guilty feeling of, oh gosh, I'm constantly walking around causing guys to stumble and all that. So what I'd like
by the way, that's why I wore a turtleneck, so I wouldn't seduce you guys.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
That was kind of you.
Thank you. I'm a married woman.
Yeah. Otherwise, we would have muted your video.
That's why I wore a shirt, so I wouldn't seduce you.
I appreciate that as well.
So what I would love to do is get maybe some further clarification from you guys and maybe fine-tune where you guys are at in this Billy Graham rule. So, Chip, first of all, with you, I want... you are here to represent the Billy Graham rule, to support it. You're a proponent of it. But how legalistic are you with it? Is there, like, no exceptions? I mean, if a woman, needs a ride to church and she's going to volunteer early that morning and she's got an option, either I leave the house at 4:30 a.m. and walk in a very unsafe part of town, or my two best girlfriends, they're out of town. I can't ride with them, so the two next people on the list, because I'm new to this church, are these two guys that I met. One's the pastor. I need a freaking ride. I don't want to walk at 4:30 in the morning. Like, how legalistic would you be with this rule?
I would probably take an offer and buy her a bicycle. No, I'm kidding.
I wish we were putting this video out. I wish we were putting this video out. I'd love everybody to see Ellen's face. Buy a bicycle, and I bet you at Goodwill, not even a new bike.
My heart is racing right now. Okay.
No.
That's good, Chip. That's good.
My deal is the rule's meant to be protective. It's meant to be a blessing. It's not meant to be stupid. And, I mean, in a one-off, obviously rare situation, I wouldn't have a problem with that. I mean, every rule, Jesus said the law is there to serve man, not man the law. So the principle is meant to be helpful to us, not hurtful to us.
Yeah.
And so now if it was an every week situation, I'm going to need this ride every week, we'd have to figure something out.
Yeah. Gotcha. So what would you say that you are, what I've heard so far from you, Chip, is safety oriented as far as safeguarding a marriage. Are you that concerned about the whole appearance of evil? In my opinion, that scripture is taken out of context. But, for example, my sister-in-law, she was on staff here at Seacoast. There were many times in which we would ride together. And for people that do not know that she's my sister-in-law, they could be like, oh, my gosh, Pastor Joey's hanging out with a younger, long-hair blonde chick. I wonder who that is. Is that something that you also are on board with avoiding? Like, how would you feel about me and Crystal riding around town together?
Well, I mean, she's your sister-in-law, so you talk about the appearance of evil thing?
Yeah.
I wouldn't worry that much about that. I'm trying to think. I mean, there's probably situations where I would, if I were in a restaurant and whatever, but I guess it's hard for me to imagine that because I know her, but I still don't think I would jump to the worst conclusions.
Yeah. Okay. Do you want to further articulate before we move on to Ellen? I've got some questions to fine-tune her perspective. Do you have anything that you want to add to this before we move on?
I mean, I don't want to be disappointing Joey by being less controversial.
No, that's fine. That's totally fine.
But
I knew who we're dealing with. You're not some crazy Bible Belt conservative fundamentalist. I know.
I mean, my deal,
which I'm disappointed about, by the way.
Well, I can probably call a little bit of that up.
So, in other words, Ellen, your heart was beating out of excitement with that bicycle comment.
No, well, Maybe. I was more horrified.
Well, I mean, my whole perspective comes from 35 years in a counseling room, and bad people, and what I mean by that is people who aren't really trying to live by any standard, they can find trouble 1,000 different ways. What I found is good people just kind of wake up there and wonder how they got there. And in my view, in my 35 years as a counselor, good people that never thought they could have an affair, I would say it almost always started with a relationship that just began to drift into deeper and deeper layers of intimacy, conversation, connection, etc. And it almost always had to do with initially just being in situations, and then eventually looking to create situations where they could be together alone. And again, it starts completely innocently. And, you've heard of they used to say that the 7-year itch.
Right.
And I would have to tell you in counseling, I've never seen that pattern. But what I have seen is what I would call the 17-year itch. And what happens about 17-ish years into a marriage is the kids start to go to, leave home. And sometimes the wife, who's been a stay-at-home mom, goes back into the workforce. And maybe the magic's gone out of their marriage or whatever. Or she has to kind of spiff up a little bit to go to work. And slowly over time, somebody's paying attention to her at a level she's not used to. Wow, my husband doesn't even look at me like that anymore. And a woman who never would have thought to end up where she ended up ends up somewhere unthinkable and with no intention to get there. And it starts with relatively innocent, well-intentioned conversations.
Cool.
that just awaken something in both people.
Okay, awesome. So here's my text message to Ellen to see if she'd be interested to be on the show. It says, "This is Joey from BC. Hope you're well. Would you ever want to talk Billy Graham rule on Pastor with No Answers? It's a podcast I do on the side." She says, "Sure," with a thumbs up. And then I respond, "You are anti, I presume. Just want to make sure I have the right person." Smiley face. She says, "Yeah, I think it's bullshit." So I said, "I think you are the right person." I guess that was not nice to you to talk about a personal text between the two of us on air, but sorry. Sorry. I mean, what else can I say? So let me ask. Go ahead, Chip.
Well, this is not, counselor's confidentiality, so go ahead, Joey.
There you go.
Share anything you want.
Awesome. So, Ellen, you'll have ample time to articulate your position, but I'll start here. Do you think there are any situations in which decent, well-intentioned guys need to practice the Billy Graham rule because they just know they need to, such as someone that says, "I cannot touch alcohol. I can't do it. You can take alcohol. I cannot, because I know myself and it sucks about me. I hate it, but I know myself and I can't touch beer." Is there a guy who's had an affair? Like, he's had an affair. He has made it up with his wife. She's still brokenhearted, but they've healed their marriage. But he's just like, "I don't ever want that to happen again." I mean, do you see situations in which a specific person needs to say, "Sorry, I just can't be with women by themselves," and a decent person, like not scum of the earth?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why when I said, I think it's bullshit, I'm talking about as it is taught as a whole that all Christian young men should start having this rule. And I mean, I was at Mars Hill for 10 years, so I understand very well what it is to have that all male leadership where women don't have the same access to counseling and pastoral care and all that. But I guess what you're asking is, I feel like it's appropriate for men who know that they have some heart issues, know that they might have some lust issues. You're right, just like someone who struggles with alcohol, someone who has either grown up around alcoholics or perhaps is an alcoholic themselves, it makes sense that they would avoid a place where there's going to be a lot of alcohol served. That makes sense.
Yeah.
But it would be very weird if someone who had no problem with alcohol never went to a gathering or anything because there might be alcohol there, because they don't want the appearance that they might be around alcohol, or the thought that if alcohol is even around me, I don't know myself. I might take a drink and then it's going to be 8 drinks and then I'm going to be sleeping with the bartender.
Yeah.
I think it's really strange. I think it's fear-based, and I think that's why I really don't like when people teach it as a good rule for just your average Joe. Again, coming out of Mars Hill, like there was this idea of like all male leadership teaching young males as disciples to be these alpha males, these like, it's all about what the appearance, this whole like, you don't want to appear to sin, right, seems to outweigh just using good judgment and having compassion. And people who are confident in their ability to use good judgment don't need to skip a party if there's going to be alcohol there, because they know. I mean, I just assume that people make their own decisions and can use good judgment. If you're not the type of person that has good judgment, then this rule is a good one for you.
See, I mean, here's what's so crazy is I think I'm going to piss off a lot of progressives to admit that I really see this as a dilemma with no easy answers, because the human side of this, though, is someone, and we'll get off this alcohol kick, someone, if they know they have an alcohol problem and they can't be around it, then they need to skip the party altogether. But we're talking people here. We're talking, people are just so unpredictable. Our brain, I don't think anyone really understands it. So who's to say that you aren't working with someone that you're initially not even attracted to, but then next thing you know, something lends itself to spending a lot of time, just the two of you, and all of a sudden you're like, holy cow, I really do feel super attracted to this person. Maybe at that point, that's when you say, okay, this isn't cool.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
That's exactly right. I just got off the phone yesterday with a friend of mine who led worship with her husband, and he ended up having an affair with someone on the worship team, and I had asked her about their journey through this whole thing and what she felt about this rule. And they're still together. They went through intensive counseling. They're doing well, but we were talking about how this happened, because he's such an incredible, like, bleeding heart guy. And I was saying that it has to start with one person. If you are spending time together, not two people get the same feeling at the same time. One person got that feeling first. And instead of shutting that down and having the awkward conversation of like, oh, I think I'm starting to have some feelings, let's stop hanging out together, by omission, those affairs are kind of, they're allowing them to happen. And we were talking about how in a workplace or in ministry, if let's say if I was working with another guy and we were having a lot of meetings together and I was having feelings for him, just the thought of having to have that conversation of, I have feelings for you, I don't think most people would. And I think that conversation could be so awkward that people just don't have it, and then they let it kind of fester, I think.
I mean, I would be an advocate, and Chip, I'm curious what you think. Don't have the conversation, just abort. You know what I'm saying? Because it seems like if you have that
yeah,
conversation, you form some bonds there, and then
right.
next time you're feeling weak, you may text that person that already knows you have feelings. Next thing you know, but I don't know. Chip,
but then what do you just abort and then not talk about it? That's
gosh, yeah. Chip, what do you think about that? So we're going off on a little rabbit trail.
I mean, well, we're not really. Back to the friend, the worship leader husband. What was her answer to how did it happen? In other words, what was his answer to her about how did this happen?
Ultimately, I really like him, but he's just dumb as a rock. And I think what happened was he didn't really, at first, he didn't notice that this woman was inserting herself into his life. So she had offered to be his assistant and do all these things while my friend had just had a baby. So my friend was not able to do her role with the church. So this woman had inserted herself, and I don't think, and that was all intentional. In hindsight, that was all intentional, but he didn't really realize that was intentional, and he didn't have his.
So for me, well, again, I'm probably not completely comfortable with the Billy Graham rule because I don't know that I see it and say it the same way they would. But in a situation like this guy, someone needs to be able to say there's the potential here for a problem. In other words, she inserted herself, as you put it, and that basically guaranteed they were going to spend time alone, have conversations that were even ministry oriented or whatever. But the bottom line is there was going to be a lot of time and talk between these two people. And, unless precautions are taken, that is a potential recipe for disaster.
Right. And I think we're dealing, though, with someone who's being very intentional to get into your marriage. That's unusual. I think that a lot of times these affairs happen with a friendship that begins, and neither one of them are intentional from the beginning. So I think that particular situation was pretty dramatic because this woman had been working her way to this affair.
So what do you think her attraction to him was?
That's a good question. I don't think he's terribly attractive, so I don't know.
This poor guy's going to listen to this podcast.
But I'll tell you what.
He's dumb as a brick, and he's not very attractive.
Hey, Chip, but she likes him. She likes him.
I'll tell you what. He deserves it. This is pretty easy. He deserves it. I love him. Anyway.
Hey, I want to tell you something. You would make a very, very good Southern girl, Ellen. That dude, he is just a dumbass. I can't stand him. Bless his heart. Bless his heart.
Okay, so Ellen, so he's not attractive and he's not exceedingly bright. What was she attracted to?
I think the leadership role. I think being the leader of the band. I think for women, especially musicians, and it's that whole the lead singer thing. No offense, honey. My husband just walked in and he's a drummer. No offense, honey. I love drummers.
And all I was fishing for is this. There was some need in her that the relationship was meeting. It wasn't sexual because it rarely starts off sexual.
Unless because she was married with children as well. Perhaps it was. Perhaps she was unhappy with. I don't know. And
his wife just had a baby, so there probably was a bit of a break going on there, sexually.
Yeah. Yep.
So, but all I'm saying is, rarely with good people is it start sexual, or even that being the issue. What happens is a connection's made. There's a need that begins to be met. And before you know it, I'm sure you're familiar with oxytocin. Before you know it, they're kind of taking oxytocin baths together, and they feel things.
Oh gosh, that sounds good.
I know exactly what you're saying, but that sounds really disgusting.
Well, and so what's happening is they begin to think, "Gosh, I really have feelings for this person."
Yeah.
And the truth is, you've built I wouldn't call it a false sense of intimacy, but you've built an inappropriate sense of intimacy. And quite honestly, it's just a matter of time before it crosses other lines.
Right.
So, Chip, why isn't it good enough? And I mean, I really feel like I can play devil's advocate with both of y'all. Why isn't it good enough for, like with what Ellen agreed with what I said as far as, well, once you start feeling that way, that's when you need to do something
Shut
about
it down.
And then,
Yeah.
Ellen, my devil's advocate question for you would be, what if you don't want to shut it down? And that could happen to the male or female, and you're thinking to yourself, dadgummit, why did I get myself in this position? Because now I really do feel
Well, that's
like...
a hard issue. That's a huge hard issue. Then your marriage is not in a good place. I mean, I think this phrase we use where, well, it could happen to anybody. As someone who is fiercely committed to their spouse, it offends me a little bit when people throw that around, because I just don't think that that's true. I feel like it's a bit, again, fear-based, which is like, well, you never know. You always got to be watching because an affair is just around the corner. Well, not for me. Not interested. You know?
Yeah, but you're jumping from one extreme to the other. The issue's not an affair is just around the corner. Like, I read a book years ago, and it talked about research that was done over the last, I think, 2-year period. And what they did was interview 250, I assume men, because they were pulpit ministry people at the time. It would probably be men. And I'm not saying that's right. I'm just saying that's probably the case.
No, I know. And I mean, they could also mostly be white evangelicals. We could really break that down.
Come on, man. They voted, 81% of them voted for Trump, I'm sure. But here's the things in the research. They found 4 things that all of them agreed with. One was they made small compromises and breaches of conscience. 2, they withdrew from loving sources of accountability. 3, they no longer kept their soul, spirit, nourishing time with God. And 4, to a person, every one of them said, I believed it could never happen to me. I mean, forgive me, Ellen, but the worst thing a person could ever think is it could never happen to me.
Yeah.
And my deal is, it's not fear, it's respect. It's respect for my marriage, and it's respect for the enemy. It's respect for the power of the culture we're in. It's respect for the mixed messages we get. The same woman on the news talking about the Me Too thing got her job because she's beautiful. Now, to me, there's kind of a standard there that's broken. I'd love to see an unattractive news anchor.
Greta Van Susteren.
There you go.
No offense, Greta. But yeah, you're right. That is one.
I mean, all I'm saying is we have reason to be cautious in the culture that we're in. And I agree with you, Ellen. I'm married to a woman who I don't think she'd be capable of having an affair. Now, I got saved at 23 after being raised American heathen, cheated on everyone I ever dated, including my wife, got saved a month after we got married. And I know both sides of the game, if you could call it that. And I know how easy it is. I know how it's just absurdly simple how people can get in trouble. And for me, it's just an issue of respect for God, respect for my wife, respect for what an idiot I can be. But a thought I had earlier was you were talking about guys with lust issues. The bottom line is the other half of this, you can't have an affair by yourself. So the other half of the equation is a woman, typically not with lust issues, but with emotional issues. And you get the two of those things rubbing together, no pun intended, and you're going to have problems.
I thought I was going to be the inappropriate one coming into this.
What's funny is I was wondering if anybody was going to say something to that one, and Chip beat me to the punch. By the way, when we go on these trips, Chip is the most inappropriate out of all of us. Sorry for selling you out there, but it's true, my friend and mentor.
Ellen knows you're lying, Joey.
I think I agree with you that women usually have affairs because of emotional stuff, and men often do because of physical stuff. I worry, one of the reasons I really don't like that this rule is so easily taken on by Christian men is because it really, I think it disproportionately and negatively affects women. Like in that article, I think it was last year with The Atlantic, they were talking about Mike Pence after he came out, and we should just edit that out. Mike Pence came out. It was talking about how in ministry, because it is overwhelmingly men in leadership, like you were saying, Joey, earlier, men can just go out, have a beer, talk about theology, get biblical counseling with each other. It's really rich. It seems to be like a really, really rich community. And where women are sort of corralled into women's Bible studies, and it's very unequal. So that's a huge problem that just needs to be dealt with in churches. And unfortunately, if you don't believe that women should be pastors, then you go to a church where women aren't in any leadership roles, really. And then, because I'm uncomfortable with a woman as a lead pastor, but I need women in pastoral counseling. I need women that I can, in some sort of role where I can go sit in their office. And at Mars Hill, we certainly saw none of that. And I think it's really, really unfortunate.
I mean, go ahead, Ellen. I'm sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, I think that this idea that, one, it's a man's rule. I think most women don't really have this rule. I'm sure a lot do, but most women don't have a rule like this. And I think that by men having this rule, it assumes one of two things. Maybe not intentionally, but it assumes one of two things. One, that the woman in the situation will be seductive in some way, I think, and that she will be sort of the perpetrator of, flirting or whatever it might be. Or two, that the man will be attracted to her and she will be powerless to resist. As a general rule, I think that if you have cheated on your spouse in the past, or if you have had lust issues, and you have that rule, then that is not your intention with that woman in the room. But let me tell you that if I need some pastoral care and all my pastors are men and they won't meet with me because I'm a woman, one, that's not compassionate. And two, it makes me feel like a whore, like, what am I doing? It's almost like it's pointing the finger at me as being the problem. Whereas if I was a man wanting to meet with a pastor for her, there's just none of that. It's not even in the room, Is there any way to minimize those sorts of things, Chip, and keep the Billy Graham rule, like women from being?
Well, I don't have, that's what I said earlier. I don't adhere to the way if I understand it correctly, I meet with women alone. Now at Seacoast, I happen to have a door with a glass, whatever. And and it's open and all, but I go to lots of different churches and I meet with women alone with the door closed at times. I'm not on that end of things. If I can't meet with a woman alone for an hour, I'm an idiot. I mean, I need freaking help. So that's not what I'm talking about. Now, what for me, the issue is just using good common sense. My deal is really pretty simple. riding cars alone, eating meals alone. In other words, anything that is extraordinarily private, a symbol of connection and intimacy, and it engenders those kinds of conversations. Any pastor who won't meet with a woman alone for counseling, I mean, whatever, bless your heart. I mean, I'm happy for you, but I don't agree with that. Now, again, Ellen, maybe what you said, if the guy knows he has a problem, then he probably shouldn't meet with women, period, alone or not.
Right. And if you're trying, like I think you said earlier, sorry, Joe, I think that Chip and I are agreeing more than you thought.
No, this is great. This is great.
I think that if you're trying to be alone, that's a red flag, and that's an issue. Why are you trying to be alone? But,
I mean, like for instance, Ellen, here's what I would do. Everywhere I go, I would, like, you know, I'll be over in Atlanta next week counseling at a church. I'll be there for 3 days doing appointments. I will have, I don't know, I'll probably have anywhere from 3 to 5, 6, 7 with just women alone in a room with me. It just isn't a big deal. But here's my rule. My rule is I always have someone in the context that I say to them this: you have my permission to challenge any relationship you see. If you see me and anyone talking in a way off in the corner that makes you uncomfortable, you have my permission to ask me what that was. If you see me or anybody else come to an appointment and they look like they're dressed for a night out on the town, you have my permission to question that. And my deal is
that applies to men too, like a really nice suit.
Yeah, I said either. And the bottom line is, you know, let's be honest though, guys, the way guys dress doesn't kick your switch.
That's not true. A really good Jeff Goldblum, the suits that he wears, just sharp.
I mean, not George Clooney, not Brad Pitt. You went Jeff Goldblum.
Jeff Goldblum all the way.
Good.
Wow,
Sorry,
that's a little scary, actually.
let me throw a scenario out there, and it'll be easier.
All right,
Okay,
Joey, let me ask Ellen a question. You said several times if a man has lust issues. How many men do you think have lust issues?
I would say that's a good point. I would say most.
All right, most is 51%.
Okay.
So what would your pick a number?
Wait a second. If we're talking about lust issues like all men innately, this is why I don't wear a bikini around my brothers kind of thing, then that's like all
I'm talking about
pornography and like allowing them to go there.
I'm talking about a man being able to look at a woman in any context and not think of her body parts and sexual scenarios.
God, I hope it's not most. When you say it like that, that makes me think you guys are all perverts.
I mean, it's pretty bad. I mean,
all right, Joey, I've already thought about the conversation. I really don't want Ellen to get all freaked out. But the truth, Ellen, is, do you believe this? And forgive me, I don't mean to make you uncomfortable. Do you believe?
I don't think you could.
Well, trust me, I probably could. In a marriage relationship, would you agree
as
that
Ellen's
a man
drinking wine? Believe me, you can't.
I have to now.
Do you believe a man is visually stimulated?
Yes. Yeah, that's how.
So you believe it?
That's how the brains work. Yeah.
Okay. So why is it so hard for a woman to realize that doesn't shut off and shut on when he comes home?
Expand a little bit.
In other words, he's not visually stimulated at your address. He's visually stimulated, period.
Yeah.
And he has to choose quite aggressively and quite consistently to not allow his eyes, thoughts, and scenarializing brain to go there.
I mean, I think Matt Carter on Bad Christian one time is probably the bravest person that I've heard accurately depict males. He said, I mean, here's the situation that we're in almost constantly, is being in a conversation with a woman, and having a decision to make almost within 30 seconds whether or not we're going to visualize ourselves having sex with her. Now, again, it's a decision to be made, but that impulse is potentially there right away. Potentially.
Now, I do believe we can get beyond that.
I agree.
Savages.
I agree. But what I'm saying is,
but Ellen, here's the thing. All this stuff. Again, let me back up and say something so we make sure I don't get it. I agree with something either you or both you and Joey said earlier, and that is this. It's definitely a subject we've got to figure out, because you're right. It isn't fair. It isn't fair that I'll walk around our offices and say, hey, who wants to go to lunch? And every woman there knows that doesn't mean you.
Right.
And I get it. We've got to figure it out. But here's the thing, Ellen. The rule's not there because we think y'all are evil. The rule is there because we know we are, and not by choice.
But don't you think that a lot of men have this rule to be sort of pious and sort of like, oh, I have this rule?
Well, if they do, they're idiots, and I don't really care.
And I should also say that I think that Billy Graham was one of the greatest humans to walk the earth. And I hate that this rule has his name on it.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I didn't even know it was called that until Joey said it the other day. I just believe, again, doing this counseling for 35 years, there's two ways good people get in trouble. Good people. What I mean by that is somebody who's not looking for trouble. Yeah. If you're looking for trouble, there's thousands. But good people end up somewhere they never thought they'd be, one of two ways. One is an unrestricted fantasy life. And that's what Joey's talking about, where you're in the presence of the opposite sex and your thoughts are going and you don't check them. You're not doing the hard work to retrain your brain. So that's one, unrestricted fantasy life. And then the second is what I would call emotional adultery. And that is where you don't have any intention, but you just begin to build a relationship with someone that begins to create oxytocin moments. And the next thing you know, you're at home thinking about that person, and you're kind of dressing the next morning, and you're like, oh, I think I'll wear that, male or female. And then you catch yourself making excuses about why you could go by their office. And what's happened is a really, really good person has created a brain connection that feels like love. And the next thing you know.
But they know if you're an adult, if you are married, and especially if you're Christian, if you are doing those things, you've already crossed the line, period.
Right. Absolutely.
So,
but guess what? You're already in trouble.
I know, but I would never do those things. If I felt myself,
then rules are made for lawbreakers.
I'm going to put my crown on right now.
Your halo.
Yeah,
I see it.
I've had feelings before.
No.
I have, and it freaked me out. It freaked me out. And you know what I did? I started praying that those feelings would go away, and I avoided like the plague. Right. That is what a healthy, good married person does. And anything less than that, it's a heart issue, I think.
So with that, would you agree with this scenario? Because you're very, I mean, we are all pro-female, pro-equality in the workplace and all of that. But let's say, so we're going to have to hire a new administrator for real at our campus next month. Let's say there's two different applicants, and out of the two, and let's say they're both, let's make it even crazy. Let's say out of the both, the most qualified is the woman, and then there's a guy applying for the administrative job.
If it's administrative, it's most likely that she's the most qualified.
Yeah, sure. So let's say she is extremely, and I mean, I just can't help it. I think we can all acknowledge beauty, and we can also acknowledge specific tastes that we have in male or female, like as far as personality, as far as looks. And I'm sitting there with this in this interview situation. I'm like, oh my gosh. I mean, I'm committed to my wife, but this woman, I I've never seen.
This woman is banging.
Yeah, she's just unbelievable. And then I'm like, man, she
Joey,
said, hold on.
I thought you felt that way about me.
Is this a confession, Joey?
No confession.
I know it.
No confession. So next thing you know, I'm like, gosh, she seems to really understand me at just how she talked and all that. Next thing you know, I'm like, where am I going with my mind? Would it be okay for me to secretly hire the less qualified applicant because I'm like, I can't work with this woman for years?
Such a good question.
Especially given that in our situation, we have such a small staff, I'm going to be by myself with this woman a lot of times. So Sarah and I, the admin that just stepped down, she's been here for 5 years. We're great friends. There was not ever even anything suggestive. It was, and we were by ourselves a lot, which I'm curious,
now,
Chip.
I want to interject right now. Was it because you were not physically attracted to her?
No, I think she's an attractive woman.
Okay.
Sure, she's attractive.
Yeah, she's very pretty.
Yeah, she's a pretty woman. So I would say that first of all, Chip, would you have felt uncomfortable knowing that Sarah and I are working in the office alone a lot? We don't really have a choice. We have a small staff.
I mean, if I felt the slightest little vibration from anybody else, I would have.
Yeah.
But knowing you, being around your staff, I know they would have said, I don't know, there's something weird between Joey and Sarah. And that's, then we'd, whatever.
All right. So
go ahead.
Yeah. So Ellen, can I bypass the higher qualified woman because Joey Svensson can't handle it? And let's say, let's because obviously the automatic go-to is, well, why does she have to deal with your deficiencies but everybody knows that me not hiring her is going to be far less disruptive to our church than me, who's been the pastor. And this sounds like I'm high and mighty and everything. But bottom line is I've been pastoring this church for decades. So that is going to be a bigger adjustment than for us not to hire an admin that nobody even knows yet. I mean,
there's a lot to unpack here. First, it's weird that churches have offices. It's weird. The whole administrative corporate role in churches have created a really strange problem. And I know this because I dated a worship pastor and it was very inappropriate. 2, it's not her fault that she's hot and talented.
Right.
And discrimination is discrimination. I understand why you would feel very uncomfortable not hiring her, but it's not really, I feel like if you would be making a decision based on your issue, then you need to resolve that issue as it comes. So if she's more qualified for the job, I think you should hire the person qualified for the job and make some rules for yourself, set some boundaries, do whatever you need to do.
Well, Ellen, is it possible, and Chip, I'd like for you to chime in on this too, is it possible that I don't have an issue? I haven't undressed her in my mind. I haven't fantasized about her sexually. I'm just like, man, this is someone that I'm attracted to in all facets, and I would just rather not. I would rather not be in that headspace during my work.
You know what I think is weird? I think it's weird that I've worked with a lot of men in offices and in retail and otherwise, and my non-Christian male friends are really less. They're less awkward.
Sure.
About the whole thing, and I think that there's something about Christian males that are just they're. Kind of tiptoeing around the whole thing, like, oh my gosh, I might have a mental affair with this woman if I hire her, and I don't think that that's fair.
But I would say that affairs are very common in Christian and non-Christian workplaces across the board. I mean, we're talking something that's very common, and I do want to say, in all fairness, the roles being reversed. If it was a woman pastor interviewing a male admin, that she was like, man, this dude is awesome. He puts my husband to shame. And why am I thinking this stuff? That would potentially be a problem too. But I agree. I mean, I don't like the situation. I don't like the scenario. Chip, would you have a problem with me calling you saying, hey, man, I did the 2 interviews I was telling you about. Let me tell you this. And I give you that scenario and I tell you, dude, I know it makes me sound like a scoundrel, but I just don't want to hire her, man. I don't want to deal with that constantly. And I feel I feel disgusted.
Then why would you have opened the job to anyone if you knew that you could not hire an attractive woman? Why would you you know what I'm saying?
Sure. But we're not talking an attractive woman. We're talking someone that I feel like a weird connection with. And again, I've never had this experience before, so I'm trying to formulate something to show that this can be a complicated thing.
If you were hiring a personal assistant, would you hire Jeff Goldblum?
Oh, she's thinking about it.
That's a good question, because again, women are not. I can appreciate someone for the things that they bring to the table without it affecting my marriage. So my husband is an introvert. He's super shy. He's not 6.5 feet tall, but he's who I want to come home to. Can I enjoy someone who's way more like me and outgoing and super tall and all of that? Yeah. Am I allowing it to affect my relationship with my husband? Am I wishing that I would rather be with this other person? No. If that ever crossed my mind, shut it down. But I can appreciate people for being attractive and hilarious and talented, and leave that in its own.
So let's say you hire Jeff Goldblum, and after a few months you realize,
is this Independence Day Jeff Goldblum or Jurassic Park Jeff Goldblum? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, this is like post all of that. This is like current Jeff Goldblum.
So, and then 2-3 months in, 6 months, a year, I don't care. You began to realize that you're at home drinking a glass of wine and you're thinking about him. Mm-hmm. How would you handle that?
I would. That would freak me out. That would freak me out.
What would you do?
That's it. Well, if it was becoming a problem, then I would just have to try and not spend alone time. If spending alone time was the issue, or if talking on the phone a lot was the issue, or sending like cute flirty texts or something, I know what I'm doing to participate in a relationship. So I know what I need to do to shut it down. So I would.
He's your personal assistant. What are you going to do?
Business only. Just like pull back on the funny and the flirting and all of that, assuming I'm being hilarious and flirting with Jeff Goldblum. But that's easy for me to say because I'm a very strong.
Yeah, I was just going to ask that. Some personalities, I think we're talking, is they wouldn't be able to do that as easily and as disciplined, and so I think that's where. Okay, so I'll at least give Seacoast. Go ahead.
Hold it, Joey. I mean, but here's the thing, Ellen. I assume you maybe figured it out, but I was trying to walk you to the point where you had to say, "I would have to fire him."
I know you were.
because the truth is that is what would happen.
That would have to happen, is what you're saying?
Or isn't it, let's say he was really good at his job.
Right.
And it's not
it wouldn't matter.
Well, but what if I could just I guess it would be different if I was working in a room alone with him every day.
He's your personal assistant. He knows all your details. You have all kinds of conversations.
So much fun. You're right.
No,
you're right. I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying.
So here's why I said all that. What I said all that is, all Joey's saying is, I know before I even hire her. So why should I hire her knowing I'm going to have to fire her?
I just worry that she would get fired for Joey feeling uncomfortable about being lusty. That's not fair to her.
I don't like how that sounds.
Well, I mean, ideally, I agree with you in principle, but in practicality, it is what it is.
Yeah, but don't you think that you have are men so weak in their biological minds that were created in this extremely visual way? Are men so weak that they have to just remove themselves from the situation instead of work on the problem and fix the problem? I have a toddler, so I know that, like, when they're really little and they start acting out, you remove them from the situation. But then as they get older, they need to know, like, no, you're going to stay in this situation and you're going to learn that you don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I mean, here's the thing. Men are no weaker than women. It's just that the battle men face is in their face every day. A woman's temptation, like you said earlier, most of the time when a good woman gets in trouble, it's because of some emotional need that's been met. Well, that's not showing the minute the dude walks in the office. What tempts the guy is showing as soon as a woman walks in the office. So it's not a difference in strength or weakness. It's just a difference in what the challenge is. And I think we just need to be, again, remember what I said. I believe this is a problem we could do better with. But the bottom line is that the answer is not arbitrary, unattainable, like for you to say, well, he just needs to man up and just not be so weak.
I would never say that.
Well, he just needs to not be so weak. Well, it's not that simple, because the very thing you want him to shut off is what you want from your husband when you come in. You want him to look at you. You want him to look at you that way.
But what happens if every attractive woman doesn't get a job because every man in ministry, or doesn't get a job in ministry because every Christian man is like, nope, can't have her in the office?
Well, I mean, fortunately, there's guys that seem to handle it better, but
not Joey, I guess.
Hey.
Well,
are you saying that Sarah, my admin's, is ugly? I'm going to let her listen to this then and let her hear it.
I mean, the reality is this: beauty and brains are a blessing and a curse, and our culture gives a lot of perks to beautiful people, and if there's a price,
you're assuming that weather woman only got her job because she was beautiful, but you don't ever think that about the guys, the weather men.
I didn't say any such thing. I didn't say that's the only reason she got it.
Roll the tape.
I didn't say that's the only reason she got it. I said, why don't you ever see any that are unattractive? Well, correct myself. You do in small town markets.
Joey, when we're done, I want to roll the tape.
I'll give you access to it.
I didn't say they got that job only.
I mean, are the three of us, and I think we are, the three of us in agreement that this is a tough situation? Like there has definitely been points in this conversation where Chip has said, yes, I'm not really sure how we fix this. That does need to be fixed. Ellen, there's been situations where you've conceded to some degree that, yep, that's a more difficult situation. I mean, is this a dilemma that Ellen would rather take more risk relationally for the sake of equality, and Chip, maybe you would rather forfeit some equality at least in the ministry workplace where ministry workers and pastors are predominantly male, you would rather forfeit that in order to protect marriages?
I would rather both. I say both like there's only two. I would rather every side of the issue was just more compassionate understanding of the challenges that are inherent in it without demonizing it. Now, I'm not saying men aren't jerks. I mean, I'm ashamed to be a man almost once every day. But there's some aspects of it that appear to be built into us by God. And I don't know what he was thinking. But it just creates some very unique challenges. And I think we're smart enough to work around it. I believe women should be in leadership better represented. I think conversationally, all of that, and what we were talking about earlier, but I don't think we can do it without considering some really tricky stuff. And I again, I couldn't even tell you how many times I've been in a room with people I would have bet money, lots of money, this person is incapable of having an affair. And there they sit. And they've ripped the heart out of their spouse and the other person's spouse.
Maybe it's just my personality, because I feel like, you've talked about good people just that were blindsided by these affairs. There's always something. Whether it's like a sin issue or a vulnerability issue. It starts somewhere, and there's something open and vulnerable to allow something.
Don't we all have those issues, though? We all have sin. We all have vulnerabilities.
Yeah, but what's the difference between me, who gets freaked? What's funny is I keep calling this rule a fear-based issue, but the thought of an affair, I would have so much anxiety about just thinking about an affair, I would pass out.
I mean, I'm with you. I find it. I've had to be taught not to say I would never have an affair, because I know what you mean when you say that, and I feel the same way. Like, I feel like I'd never do that, because at some point in the act I'd be like, holy crap, what am I doing? I can't do this. But
it's like when people rob a bank because they want to be able to go to Jamaica, and Jamaica maybe not the right, somewhere, and spend all the money. It's like, did you not know that you're going to be caught and then be in jail, and you're not going to get any of the money? Or people who murder people for the life insurance. I never understand that, and it's the same. Does this make any sense? Where having an affair makes no sense to me, because it's not just that. You're not going to be able to enjoy that feeling. You're going to have to deal with your broken marriage and the broken situation with your children. You don't get to have that.
Yeah, but that is a personality type, because I've seen situations in which the person was like, yeah, moving on. Like, I'd rather be with this person anyway. Yeah, it is sad.
Well, when Cole and I first got married, we were kind of friend counseled by this older, not that much older, but couple who went to Mars Hill with us. And I remember the first dinner that we had after Cole and I sort of were officially dating, because Cole and I were friends before. I was friends with Cole and all of his guy roommates. I was one of those, like, one of the guys' girls, which now I see is a little bit inappropriate, just because of the late nights and all of that. But I remember sitting at the table and being told that, no, men and women cannot be friends, period. And this was someone who I respect, happily married, super cool gal. But she kept telling me over and over, men and women just simply cannot be friends. And here I am, about to be engaged to my guy friend, who I was friends with, and then he felt like God was sort of telling him to pursue me. So if we hadn't had a friendship where we could just be buds and hang out alone and all of that, we would have never been to cultivate a relationship. Now, what was really hard about that is I felt it was unfair, because we had all these similar friends, mostly guys, where I felt like, when people get divorced, they kind of have to split up the friends. It was almost the opposite. When we got married, we had to split up the friends, where most of our guy friends couldn't really talk to me anymore, because all of a sudden, it was very inappropriate. And
what? Why? That's weird.
It was weird. And this
was this at Mars Hill?
This was at Mars Hill. And
that's the problem.
I know.
Such a jacked up place.
But this is why I get worried about it being taught as a general rule for young men to follow, instead of a rule to be used if you know that you struggle with certain issues. My husband, I have no problem with him hanging out with any of our gal friends alone, because they love each other, they respect each other. There would be no way. If Cole started having feelings for someone, he would feel so uncomfortable, he would leave.
And I hope you're correct. And I'm not saying you're not. I'm just saying that I know people that thought the same thing.
Yeah, no, and I get that, and you've got a lot more experience than that. But I know my husband, and I know that he would.
Can I creep you out?
Yes.
This is creepy now.
All right, I got my earmuffs on. Go ahead.
Were you very active in a certain way before you got married?
I was. My husband was not.
Okay. So you crossed lines that you knew were wrong.
Sure, yeah.
Why?
Well, because I was not really. Well, that's a huge question to just expect a quick answer from. I'm a pastor's kid, and I had brothers, and nobody. It was all about. Here's why I think I did so. No, my brothers and my dad never cared who I dated, who I was with. They never checked on me or anything until something happened, and then it was all shame. We knew this was going to happen to you. Like, I got an STD once. I had to have uterine surgery for something that I caught from some asshole.
Right.
Not one of the men in my family that should have been protecting me and watching me grow and treating me as a woman and as a daughter of God ever said, like, I'm sorry that we weren't more involved in your life. It was like, see, that's what you get. So,
right.
So that's my experience with men. Are they great guys? Sure. Are they great dads and great husbands? Yes. But from all the years that I've had to put this together, it's a lot of shame. And it came from my family being in ministry and how everything looked. And just the sort of like, if they're following rules to follow rules and not really dealing with any hard issues.
Yeah. Well, and again, I'm sorry if I made you uncomfortable with any of that.
I could talk about it forever, but nobody wants to hear about STDs.
What was the line of questioning, though?
We could do a whole episode on just like sleeping around.
There you go.
And then being a redeemed daughter of the Lord.
Yes.
Well, what would be good is to examine the whys, because we don't do anything that doesn't meet a need. So the trick is to figure out what need it meets, and those are worthwhile discussions.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think my husband and I have been talking about the Billy Graham rule a lot, and I'm happy to report that him and I feel very similarly, which is
right.
Which is like, if you ever find yourself wanting to be alone with someone else, that's weird. But also, we always check in with each other. Like, hey, he never doesn't know where I am, especially if I'm going to have like a lunch with one of our guy friends or something like that. Let's say, I don't know. There's nothing behind our back. I would rather Cole leave me and then go on to be with this woman that he wants to be with than cheat on me. You know what I mean?
Right.
If you're going to do it.
Do you guys
let me off the hook?
But in your own way, you have an adapted version of this rule.
Because we talk about it?
Well, because you there's a level of I'm with you. I don't like the word fear, but let's use it. There's a level of caution, we'll call it, that you guys operate in, and you honor that by some of the things you do to keep each other in the loop of. And that's in spirit. That's the same thing we're trying to say. That my deal is, I don't want to put any wood on a fire, so there's nothing to light. And if again, I meet with women alone, that's not an issue. But if somebody said, "Hey, can you meet me for dinner and we can talk about blah blah blah," I'd be like, I can't do that. If you want to come to the office, I can meet you at the office.
Mm-hmm.
But
anything that resembles a date, I think, is weird. And regardless if you have the Billy Graham rule or not, it would be weird for a woman to ask you without also inviting your wife. That's weird.
Right. Absolutely.
I think it's just using judgment. I think that's weird for married people, whether you're Christian or not.
Mm-hmm.
And
because again, good people that aren't looking for trouble, they don't jump into trouble. They drift there.
And people who are going to cheat are going to go around the rules, even if you have these rules set in place.
But the only thing, Ellen, that you seem more comfortable saying than I would be is, yes, there's people that intend to cheat, but you kind of don't seem to get that there's really good people that never intended to be there and they ended up there.
I think maybe you're scaring me because I'm not going to do it.
No, I'm not going to either.
I know, but but you and I are good people and we didn't see it coming.
I mean, I do think that's the reality. I like, from a very scientific standpoint, the people that I know in my life who I trust, I have to assume that how I feel right now, which I feel it's impossible to cheat on my wife, they felt that way before cheating.
Well, nobody gets married to get divorced, and nobody thinks that they're going to cheat.
Yeah,
right.
Well, I think. Go ahead. I'm wrapping things up.
I think the safety, Joey, is to Ellen. A lot of things is it Cole, COLE?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of things you guys are already doing. That's all part of it, and have a same-sex friend that you say, hey, if you're ever struggling or I'm ever struggling, are you good if we talk about it? And Joey could be one of those guys that I would do it with. I remember when I came to work at Seacoast, there was a particular person on staff that just got in my head a little bit. I went to Greg and I said, hey, nobody's doing anything wrong, but I just want you to know this one person's kind of gotten in my head. Don't have a clue why. And I just said, just keep an eye on me / us. And it was just a way to, here's my deal. Once you pull it out in the open like that, it ain't going to go anywhere.
Oh, these terms you're using are just on the money.
Oh, wow. Wow. You guys are nasty.
Hey, I'm not a pastor. I can be inappropriate. One thing I wanted to say was that when I was talking to my friend whose husband had an affair, they have 2 young girls. She was saying, we don't have a strict rule like that. Obviously, now there's a thing, and so he's not going to go to dinner with a woman. And he's obviously not working at a church anymore. But she said he can't just be in a man bubble forever where he's not allowed to be with women because we're raising 2 girls. And how bizarre for these girls to grow up thinking, my dad's not allowed to be around people like me or women. My dad must, what is that? My dad must be some sort of, predator, which it's also kind of dangerous. So I think there's this sort of if you don't have really awesome communication in your marriage, you're going to swing to one side or the other, I think.
That's a fair statement. And I would say not just good communication in your marriage, but even like with somebody like that, as a counselor, what I would want to do is figure out, how did you get there? Mm-hmm. Because everything we do serves a purpose, meets a need, or we wouldn't do it again. And so some need was being met from the very beginning that eventually ended up somewhere he didn't want to go. My thing would be, what was that need?
Right. And that's what I want to do too. And that's what I want men and women to understand, that it not that it can happen to anyone, but what is it that you tend to have little feelings about that you're not noticing? It's just being very self-aware. And maybe that is why I have the type of personality that I do, that I'm so self-aware that nothing about me comes as a surprise, really. It's not even though I said earlier, it freaked me out that I started to have some feelings. It wasn't a surprise to me because this person was actually good looking, Mm-hmm. So it wasn't oh my gosh, I didn't see this coming. It was this makes sense. He's attractive. Now I think he's very annoying and not that good looking.
Yeah.
Because prayer works, guys.
There you go. This isn't a formality for our show, Ellen, just so you know. But I do want to ask, do you guys think through this conversation, both of you have kind of a more respect, a higher level of respect for the other point of view with this discussion? Do y'all feel like y'all have heard some good perspective as to why the other person feels so strongly as they do?
Sure. I mean, I think 30 years as a biblical counselor just puts me to shame And I'm saying that as a compliment. And I've learned a lot over my life that the second I start thinking I have an opinion about something I know nothing about, I'm probably mostly wrong.
Yeah. I mean, my biggest thing, Joey, is I believe it's an issue we could do a lot better. We could handle it more openly, honestly, sensitively, and every part of it own what they need to own.
Yeah.
But I definitely think we can handle it better.
Yeah.
I would ask, though, just as a woman's perspective, when you guys have these conversations, when you're going to your men's retreats or whatever, really think about how a woman is going to feel when they are told, no, I won't meet with you, or I can't meet with you, or all of those things, because it can be really isolating and hurtful, and it's not helpful,
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
we definitely can't get into this deeply, but if any of you have any quick comments on this, we'll wrap it up here. And this is not meant to be a joke, but I mean, we've left out, in my opinion, kind of an elephant in the room and it really doesn't matter what someone thinks as far as the morality of this, but bottom line is there are men and women that are orientated in a way where they're attracted to the same gender, and they may feel like that is a sin and they need to avoid, or they may feel like monogamy is okay with the same sex, but do they have an opposite Billy Graham rule? And if so, do they have to tell everyone, hey, I'm not attracted to the opposite gender, so I can't be with the same gender? Just something interesting to keep in mind, that we're all talking from a standpoint of heterosexuals, when a homosexual would be like, whoa, this Billy Graham rule does not work for me.
Well, but the concept applies. And like I said earlier, it doesn't matter if you're Christian or not. This rule has nothing to do with Christianity. I think it has more to do with protecting your marriage.
Yeah.
And so if you're a homosexual married person, this rule still applies. Now, go find, Joey, your third guest should have been a gay pastor.
There you go. Oh, that's easy to find.
Joey, you dropped the ball, man.
It's very easy.
Well, for the record, both of you, I love you very much. I would definitely need the Billy Graham rule with both of y'all.